My parents told me I'd die if I went outside. Our parents never let us leave the house because we had a rare immune disorder that made the outside world deadly to us. My 3 siblings and I had lived our entire lives inside the same walls. Mom homeschooled us at the kitchen table. Dad worked from his home office. We watched other kids through the windows playing on the street, but Mom said one breath of unfiltered air would send us into anaphylactic shock. We had special filters on every vent and an airlock system at the front door like we were living in a bubble. I had vague memories from when I was really young of being in a bright open space with other children laughing. Mom said it was just a dream, but the memory felt different from dreams. It had smells attached to it like sunscreen and cut grass. When I was 7, I tried to follow Dad outside when he left for work. Mom grabbed me so hard she left bruises on my arms and locked me in my room for 3 days. "You could have died," she kept saying through the door. "You could have killed your siblings with the contamination." After that, I never tried again. Living inside was like being underwater. The same recycled air, the same walls. Things started changing when I turned 16. I found Mom's old laptop in the attic and discovered she'd forgotten to wipe the search history. There were dozens of searches about homeschooling laws and keeping children calm in isolation. Nothing about immune disorders. When I asked my parents what our condition was specifically called, Mom said, combined variable environmental immunodeficiency, which yielded 0 search results online. Even the rarest diseases had at least one mention. Our disease didn't exist. I started talking to someone in an online support group for chronic illness. His name was James, and he actually had SCID. "You should at least have medical equipment," he wrote. "Oxygen tanks? Emergency meds? Something." But we had nothing. Just walls and locks. "Try opening your window," James suggested one night. "Just a crack. If you were really that sick, you'd know immediately." My hands shook as I opened my bedroom window just an inch. The night air touched my face for the first time I could remember. It was cold and smelled like rain and earth and life. Nothing happened. No reaction. No symptoms. My lungs didn't close up. My skin didn't burn. I was fine. "More," James encouraged the next night. "Open it more." I opened it halfway and stuck my whole head out. The wind moved through my hair. I could hear things differently without walls muffling them. Dogs barking, cars in the distance. The world was so much bigger than our house. Still no reaction. My body was perfectly healthy. "We're not sick," I told my siblings one day when our parents were both in Dad's office on a work call. "I've been breathing outside air for weeks." My sister's eyes went wide. "That's impossible." "Try it yourself," I said. We stood by the back door, my hand on the handle. "Just one breath," I said. We opened it and all 4 of us breathed in the summer air. Nothing happened. We weren't dying. We weren't even uncomfortable. My youngest brother started crying. Why would they lie? That's what I needed to find out. There was only one place we were most forbidden from going. Dad's shed in the backyard. He kept it padlocked and said it stored chemicals that could compromise our air filtration system. But now I knew that was just another lie. James helped me figure out how to pick locks using YouTube videos. It took me 3 days of practice on my bedroom door before I felt ready. If they caught me, there would be no excuse. But I had to know the truth. I waited until 3 a.m. when everyone was deeply asleep. The walk across the backyard was surreal. I'd never felt grass under my feet. It was wet with dew and stuck between my toes. The sky was enormous above me, full of stars I'd only seen through glass. 16 years inside, and here I was standing outside perfectly healthy. The shed smelled like dust and old paint. I used my phone's flashlight to look around. Tools hung on the walls. Paint cans lined the shelves. Normal shed things. But in the back corner was a filing cabinet. Inside were folders organized by year. I pulled out one from 12 years ago. Inside were newspaper clippings, and I started reading. My flashlight illuminated the headline, 4 children vanish from playground. Massive search underway. I stand frozen in the shed, staring at the newspaper clipping with 4 small faces under the headline about vanished children, and my hands shake so badly I nearly drop my phone. The date is from 12 years ago. The location matches the vague memory I have of sunscreen and grass. The ages of the missing children line up perfectly with me and my siblings. I take photos of everything with trembling fingers, making sure to capture every detail clearly. My phone camera clicks in the dark as I photograph the headline, the date, the 4 faces that could be us. I force myself to look through more folders in the filing cabinet, finding documents that make my stomach turn. There are birth certificates with our current names, but the seals look wrong, like someone printed them at home. Medical records appear handwritten rather than typed on official forms. I find a stack of old photographs showing 4 young children at various parks and playgrounds. One photo shows the same kids from the newspaper clipping, and I know in my bones it's true. I discover an envelope containing an old address from 3 states away with postmarks dating back 13 years. Inside are what look like practice signatures. The same name written over and over in slightly different styles. A notebook has our medical condition name written out multiple times in different handwriting, like someone was rehearsing the lie. My whole body feels cold despite the summer heat in the shed. I carefully photograph every piece of evidence I can find, organizing the images into folders on my phone. The filing cabinet has years of documentation showing how carefully they planned this. Maps with routes marked in red pen. Newspaper clippings tracking the search efforts that eventually went cold. I feel sick knowing how much effort went into stealing our lives. I sneak back across the wet grass to the house, my heart pounding so hard I can hear it in my ears. The back door creaks slightly as I slip inside, and I freeze for a full minute listening for any sound of movement upstairs. When I'm certain no one has woken, I tiptoe to my room and quietly close the door. I can't sleep, so I spend the next 2 hours hiding copies of the evidence in multiple locations. I email the photos to myself using 3 different accounts I create with fake names. I hide my phone in a loose floorboard under my bed that I discovered years ago. I write down the key details on paper and stuff it inside an old book on my shelf. If they find one copy, I'll still have others. I lie in bed as dawn light starts filtering through my window, replaying that memory of being in a bright open space with other children. The smell of sunscreen and cut grass feels so real now. Not like a dream at all, but like a stolen moment from my actual life. I think about the parents in that newspaper article who lost their children. I wonder if they're still looking for us. I wonder if they think we're dead. At breakfast, I watch Mom and Dad carefully, studying their faces for any sign of guilt or fear. Mom makes pancakes like always, humming while she cooks. Dad reads news on his tablet while drinking coffee. They look so normal, so parental, and it makes me feel crazy knowing what I discovered just hours ago. Mom asks if I slept well, and I lie and say yes. Dad reminds us about our math lessons this afternoon. Everything is the same as every other morning we've had for 16 years. After breakfast, when our parents are both occupied with work calls in Dad's office, I gather my siblings in the room we use as a playroom and close the door. I show them the photos on my phone, watching their faces change as they process what they're seeing. My younger brother starts crying immediately. My sister's face goes pale and she grabs the phone from my hands to look closer. My other sibling just stares at the photos in silence. My sister refuses to believe it at first. She insists there must be some explanation, and that Mom and Dad would never lie to us about something this huge. My other sibling just stares at the photos in silence, not saying anything. My younger brother keeps asking why someone would do this to us. I try to stay calm and logical, walking them through each piece of evidence. I show them the birth certificates with different names. I show them the newspaper clipping with our faces. I show them the maps and the practice signatures. My sister keeps shaking her head like she can make it not be true. I spend the next hour trying to calm everyone down and get them to understand what we need to do next. My sister keeps saying there has to be another reason for all this, but I can see doubt starting to show on her face when I point out specific details in the photos. My younger brother won't stop crying, so I sit with him and let him lean against me while we all try to figure out our next move. Once everyone is calmer and our parents are still locked in their office on their work call, I sneak back to my room and pull out the old laptop. I open the support group and start writing a message to James, being careful about what I say in case someone else sees it. I attach some of the photos, but I make sure to crop out anything that shows our exact address or could identify us too easily. My hands shake as I type out the details about what I found and ask if this looks like real medical paperwork to him. I hit send and then sit there staring at the screen, refreshing over and over. Within an hour, there's a response, and I open it so fast I almost drop the laptop. James wrote back just a few simple sentences, but they make my whole body relax a little. He says that's not medical paperwork, that's forgery, and I need to be careful, but I also need to get help. Seeing someone else confirm that I'm not crazy or making this up helps me breathe easier. I save his message and close the laptop, then hide it back under my bed. That evening after dinner, when our parents think we're doing homework, I take the laptop to the bathroom and lock the door. I start Googling the missing children case using the details from the newspaper clipping. I find forum posts and Facebook groups that are still active after all these years. Parents and relatives still post on the anniversary dates, sharing memories and begging for any information about what happened to the 4 kids. There are age progression photos showing what the missing children would look like now, created by forensic artists who specialize in this kind of thing. I stare at those images for a long time because the resemblance is crazy. The girl who would be my age now looks almost exactly like me. Same nose and eyes and face shape. I find photos of my siblings too, and the similarities are impossible to ignore. I take screenshots of everything and save them to a folder on the laptop, making sure to document all the evidence I can find. The next morning at breakfast, I decide to test Mom by asking specific questions about our condition. I use the medical terms James taught me during our conversations, asking about T-cell counts and immunoglobulin levels and other things that would definitely be tracked if we really had the disease she claims we have. Mom's face gets all flustered and red, and she changes the subject fast, saying I don't need to worry about the technical details and that she and Dad handle all the medical stuff. I press a little more, asking when our last blood test was and what our numbers were, and she gets actually mad, telling me to stop questioning her and finish my breakfast. I apologize and act like I'm dropping it, but I'm watching how uncomfortable she got and how she couldn't answer a single specific question. Later that afternoon, Mom announces she's going to the store and Dad shuts himself in his office for a work call that's supposed to last an hour. This is my chance, and I know I have to take it. I grab the old laptop from under my bed and wrap it in a plastic bag, then wait by the front door listening to make sure Dad is really on his call. When I hear his voice through the office door talking to someone about work stuff, I unlock the front door as quietly as possible and slip outside. The neighbor's recycling bin is sitting at the curb waiting for tomorrow's pickup, and I walk over to it trying to look casual even though my heart is beating so hard. I lift the lid and shove the laptop down under some cardboard and papers, making sure it's hidden but also somewhere it won't get crushed. As I'm closing the lid, I see Heidi Nolan from across the street standing on her porch watching me. Our eyes meet for just a second, and I try to communicate with my expression that something is wrong, that I need help. She gives a tiny nod like she understands, and I hurry back inside before anyone notices I left. That night, after everyone is asleep, I use my phone to video call James. I'm under my covers with the volume turned way down so no one hears. He answers right away, and I can see his face in the dim light from his room. I tell him everything about the evidence and the photos and what I've discovered, and he listens without interrupting. When I finish, he says I need to contact authorities as soon as it's safe to do so. He explains that what's happening to us is criminal, and that we're in real danger now that I've discovered the truth. We talk through different scenarios about what might happen if I report, like whether we'd be taken away immediately, or if there would be an investigation first. The fear is so big it feels like it's choking me, but the need to escape this lie is even bigger. James promises to help however he can, and tells me to be careful and smart about my next moves. The next day, I decide to test our parents again, this time with Dad. I deliberately leave my bedroom door wide open when I know he's going to walk by on his way to the kitchen. Sure enough, within 2 minutes he comes down the hall and sees my door open. He stops immediately and closes it, then opens it again to lecture me about contamination risks, and how I'm putting everyone in danger. His voice is tight and stressed in a way I've never heard before, and he watches me the whole time I apologize and promise to be more careful. I act totally compliant and sorry, but I'm studying how fast he reacted and how controlled his response was, like he's been practicing what to say if this happened. After he leaves, I sit on my bed thinking about how everything they do is calculated and planned. That afternoon, when our parents are both busy, I gather my siblings in the playroom again and close the door. I tell them we need to create a code word system in case we need to communicate something urgent without our parents understanding. We decide on a few simple phrases that sound normal but have hidden meanings like, "I'm really tired" means "something's wrong," and "Did you finish your math" means "meet in the bathroom." We also start preparing go bags with essentials like clothes and important items, hiding them in the backs of our closets where our parents won't look. My sister is finally starting to accept the truth about everything, and we all agree that we need to stick together no matter what happens next. My younger brother asks if we'll ever see Mom and Dad again, and I don't know how to answer that question, so I just hug him and say we'll figure it out together. Later that evening, I remember seeing an old phone in the junk drawer in the kitchen a few weeks ago. I wait until our parents are watching TV and sneak down to grab it, then take it to my room and plug it in to see if it still works. The battery is dead, but after charging for an hour, it turns on and I'm able to connect to our Wi-Fi. I find the missing person's hotline number from one of the websites I looked at earlier and open the tip submission form. My hands shake so bad I can barely type as I fill in the details about our address and the evidence in the shed. I attach several of the photos I took, making sure to include the newspaper clipping and the birth certificates. After I write everything out, I read it over 3 times to make sure it makes sense. Then I hit send before I can chicken out. The confirmation message says someone will review the tip within 24 hours and gives me a case number to reference. I write down the number on a piece of paper, then turn off the phone and hide it in the bathroom air vent behind the metal grate. The next morning, Mom and Dad make an announcement at breakfast that we need to do a deep cleaning of the whole house. They say the air filters need maintenance and they're going to collect all our electronic devices to make sure nothing is interfering with the filtration system. I feel my stomach drop, but I keep my face calm and normal. They go through each of our rooms one by one, taking phones and tablets and anything with a screen or battery. I'm so grateful I hid the important stuff because they're being really thorough, checking drawers and under beds. The atmosphere in the house feels different now, tense and watchful in a way it never has before. Mom keeps glancing at Dad like they're communicating without words, and Dad seems jumpy and on edge. That night, after everyone goes to bed, I wait until after midnight, then sneak to the bathroom and retrieve the phone from the air vent. I turn it on with the brightness all the way down and create a new email account using a fake name. I upload all the photos to a cloud storage account so they'll be safe even if the phone gets found and destroyed. I also write down the tip line number and the case number they gave me on a small piece of paper. Back in my room, I carefully pull up the corner of my mattress and find a small tear in the lining, then stuff the paper inside where no one will find it. Every precaution feels necessary now because I can tell our parents are getting suspicious, and I don't know how much time we have left before something happens. I wait 3 more nights before going back to the shed, because I need to be absolutely sure everyone is sleeping deeply. At 1:30 a.m. on the 4th night, I slip out of bed and tiptoe down the stairs, avoiding the creaky 3rd step from the bottom. The grass is cold and wet again under my bare feet as I cross the yard. Inside the shed, I go straight to the filing cabinet and start checking for locked drawers I missed before. There's one at the very bottom that won't open when I pull the handle. I use my bobby pin technique, and after about 5 minutes of careful work, the lock clicks. Inside are official-looking documents with raised seals, and I pull them out with shaking hands. These are birth certificates, but the names are completely different from what I've been called my whole life. The parents listed aren't mom and dad. My real birth name is printed right there in black ink, and it feels like reading about a stranger. I stare at it for a long time, trying to make it feel real. My siblings have different names too. Names I've never heard before. I take photos of each certificate, making sure the flash captures every detail clearly. In the same drawer underneath the certificates, I find an old photograph that's bent at the corners from age. 4 small kids are standing in front of playground equipment, and I recognize that red slide from my earliest memory. I flip it over and someone wrote 4 names in blue pen, along with a date from 13 years ago. These must be our real names, the ones we had before we were taken. I match the names to the birth certificates and everything lines up perfectly. The evidence is right here in my hands, proving that everything about our lives has been a lie. I take multiple photos of both sides of the picture, my hands shaking so badly I have to brace my arms against the filing cabinet to keep the camera steady. I keep searching and find a big manila envelope stuffed in the back of the drawer. Inside are apartment lease papers from a city I've never heard of that's 3 states away. The dates are from the year before we disappeared, according to the newspaper articles. There are also utility bills with the same address, and what looks like printed maps with notes scribbled in the margins. Someone circled certain playgrounds and parks in red pen, and drew routes between them. Looking at this makes me feel sick to my stomach because it shows how much planning went into taking us. This wasn't some sudden mistake or bad decision. They spent months figuring out where to find kids and how to grab us without getting caught. I photograph everything in the envelope, then put it all back exactly how I found it and close the drawer. My legs feel weak as I walk back to the house. I go straight to my siblings' rooms and wake them up one by one, putting my finger to my lips so they stay quiet. We gather in the room we share for playing games, and I show them the photos on my phone. My younger brother starts crying right away when he sees the birth certificates. My sister takes his hand and squeezes it while we all crowd around the small screen. We whisper about these names that belong to us, trying them out quietly to see how they sound. None of them feel right because we've never heard them before. We're looking at our own identities like they're artifacts from someone else's life. My sister keeps staring at her real name and touching the screen like she can't believe it's real. The sun is just starting to come up when we finally go back to our rooms. I hide my phone again and try to sleep, but I'm too wired. At breakfast a few hours later, Dad makes an announcement that sounds casual but feels dangerous. He says we need to do extra filter maintenance for the whole next week. Everyone has to stay in their rooms except for meals. No exceptions. Mom nods along, but she looks stressed and keeps glancing at Dad like they've been talking about something serious. The way they're acting makes me think they know I've been snooping around even though I've been so careful. This sudden lockdown feels like a trap closing around us. During lunch the next day, I have maybe 10 minutes out of my room while Mom is in the bathroom and Dad is on a work call. I grab a piece of paper and write as fast as I can, asking for a welfare check at our address. I explain that we're being held inside against our will and need help urgently. I fold it up and address it to Heidi Nolan across the street because she's watched us through the windows for years and might believe something is wrong. When I take the trash out to the curb, I slip the note through her mail slot, my heart beating so hard I can barely breathe. It's a huge risk, but we're running out of time and options. From my bedroom window later that afternoon, I watch Heidi's front porch. She comes out to get her mail, and I see her notice the paper that wasn't there this morning. She picks it up and reads it right there on her porch. Then she looks up at our house for what feels like forever. I stay back from the window so she can't see me clearly, but I think she knows I'm watching. Finally, she gives a small nod, just once, before going back inside. I feel this huge wave of relief mixed with total terror about what happens next. There's no taking it back now. That evening, Dad comes into my room without knocking. I'm sitting on my bed and I don't see the bobby pin lockpick I made sitting right there on my desk until he walks over and picks it up. His face goes completely cold and blank in a way that scares me more than if he was yelling. He asks what I've been doing in this super calm voice that makes my skin crawl. I try to say I was just messing around, but he cuts me off. He starts going through my room, taking anything that could possibly be used as a tool. He empties my desk drawers and checks under my mattress and goes through my closet. When he's done, he tells me I'm grounded to my bed except for bathroom breaks. No exceptions. Then he leaves without closing the door so he can watch me from the hallway. I wait until I hear him go downstairs before I move. I have maybe 2 minutes before he comes back to check on me. I grab my real phone from the floorboard hiding spot and swap it with an old broken phone I've had in my drawer for years. The broken one looks similar enough that hopefully he won't notice right away. When Dad comes back up, he sees the decoy phone on my nightstand and takes it. I act really upset and defeated, slumping down on my bed like I've given up. He seems satisfied with my reaction and leaves again. The real phone is back in the floorboard, my only connection to the outside world and all the evidence I've gathered. Late that night, I hear voices coming through the wall from Mom and Dad's bedroom. They're arguing, and their voices are loud enough that I can make out some words. Dad says something about moving again and starting over somewhere else. Mom sounds like she's crying, and her voice is all high and stressed. I press my ear against the wall and hold my breath to hear better. Dad keeps saying they don't have a choice and they need to leave soon. Mom asks about us kids and what they'll tell us. My heart is racing because I realize they're planning to run away and take us with them. They know someone is closing in on them. Everything I've done to gather evidence and get help is making them panic. I need that welfare check to happen soon before they can pack us up and disappear to some new place where no one will ever find us. I barely sleep that night, and when morning light starts coming through my window, I'm already awake and watching. Around 9 o'clock, I see Heidi come out of her house and walk to the end of her driveway, where a man in jeans and a polo shirt is waiting. He has a notebook and he's writing things down while she talks. She keeps looking over at our house and pointing, and I press myself against the wall next to the window, so my parents won't catch me watching if they walk past my room. The man nods a lot and writes more notes, and Heidi gestures toward our windows and the front door. My heart is beating really fast because I know she got my note and she's actually doing something about it. The man takes out his phone and makes a call while Heidi waits, and they talk for maybe 15 more minutes before he gets in his car and drives away. Heidi looks directly at my window before going back inside, and I hope she can tell I'm grateful, even though she can't see me clearly. I wait until I hear Mom in the kitchen before I risk moving away from the window. I need to tell my siblings what I just saw, but we have to be careful about when and where we talk. Dad is already in his office on a call and Mom is making breakfast. So I use the bathroom and knock quietly on the doorframe of my sister's room on my way back. She looks up from her bed and I mouth the word bathroom and hold up 5 fingers for 5 minutes. She nods once and I go back to my room to wait. My younger brother walks past in the hallway and I catch his eye and make the same gesture, and he understands immediately because we've gotten good at silent communication over the past few days. When enough time has passed, I tell Mom I need the bathroom again, and she barely looks up from the eggs she's cooking. My sister is already in there waiting, and my younger brother slips in right after me, and our other sibling comes in last and closes the door behind them. The bathroom is tiny with all 4 of us crammed inside, but it's the only room in the house without a window where someone could see us gathering. My sister sits on the edge of the tub and my younger brother leans against the sink while I stay by the door so I can hear if anyone comes down the hallway. I keep my voice barely above a whisper and tell them about Heidi talking to the man with the notebook and how I think the welfare check is really going to happen. My sister's face goes pale and she asks what we're supposed to say when they come, and I remind her we agreed to tell the truth about everything we found in the shed. My younger brother keeps asking if we're doing the right thing, his voice shaking, and I can see he's really scared about what happens after we tell. I explain again that we have to stick together and tell the exact same story about the evidence, about the filing cabinet and the newspaper clippings and the birth certificates with our real names. My other sibling hasn't said anything yet but nods along, and I can tell they're processing everything and trying to stay calm. We go over the main points in whispers, agreeing to mention the shed specifically, and the folders organized by year, and to explain that we're not actually sick, because we've been breathing outside air with no problems. My sister is scared, but she looks determined now, and she says we should talk about the fake medical condition name that doesn't exist anywhere online. My younger brother asks what happens if Mom and Dad try to stop us from talking to the police or social workers, and I tell him that's exactly why we need to speak up fast before they can interfere. We practice staying calm and not getting too emotional because we need people to believe us, and my sister reminds everyone to be specific about dates and details. I can hear Mom moving around in the kitchen, so I tell everyone to leave one at a time with a few minutes between so it doesn't look suspicious. My younger brother goes first, then my other sibling. Then my sister and I wait another few minutes before flushing the toilet and washing my hands like I actually used the bathroom. Back in my room, I pull the phone from its hiding spot in the floorboard and sit on my bed with my back to the door. I look up the non-emergency police number for our area, and my finger hovers over the call button while I try to decide if this is the right move. Heidi already talked to that man, so maybe the welfare check is already in motion. But what if it's not enough or takes too long and my parents really do try to run? I press the call button and bring the phone to my ear, listening to it ring once, twice, and then I hear footsteps in the hallway coming toward my room. I panic and hit the end call button, then quickly go into the call history and delete the number. Dad's footsteps are getting closer, and I shove the phone back into the floorboard hiding spot and barely get the board back in place before he appears in my doorway. He asks what I'm doing, and I say, I was just sitting here thinking, which sounds stupid, but it's all I can come up with. He stares at me for a long moment like he's trying to figure out if I'm lying, and then he tells me to come downstairs for breakfast. My heart is still beating hard from the close call as I follow him down, and I realize how dangerous this situation has gotten now that they're watching us so carefully. At breakfast, nobody talks much, and the tension in the kitchen feels thick enough to cut. Mom serves eggs and toast, but I can barely eat because my stomach is in knots. Dad watches all of us while he drinks his coffee, and I can tell he's suspicious about something even if he doesn't know exactly what. That afternoon, Mom and Dad call all of us into the living room and announce they need to do some maintenance on the air circulation system. Dad goes upstairs with his toolbox, and we hear drilling and banging sounds, and when he comes back down, he's carrying my bedroom door. Mom explains that the doors need to come off temporarily to improve airflow throughout the house, and she says it in this fake, cheerful voice that makes my skin crawl. Dad takes down all 4 bedroom doors one by one and stacks them in the garage, and then Mom goes into the bathroom and takes down the shower curtain too. She says we don't need privacy for air circulation to work properly, and I realize they're making sure we can't have any private conversations or hide anything without them seeing. The level of control is suffocating, and my siblings look as freaked out as I feel. Without doors on our bedrooms, we're completely exposed, and Mom and Dad start taking turns sitting in the hallway where they can watch all of us at once. I go to my room and sit on my bed, feeling their eyes on me constantly. My sister tries to read a book but keeps glancing at the doorway where Mom is positioned in a chair. My younger brother just lies on his bed staring at the ceiling, and I can tell he's trying not to cry. The surveillance is constant now, and I know it's because they suspect something is wrong. I wait until Mom gets up to use the bathroom herself before I risk retrieving the phone from the floorboard, and I only have maybe 2 minutes before she'll be back. I grab the phone and head to the bathroom, closing the door behind me even though there's no shower curtain and the space feels exposed. I pull up the photos of the birth certificates and the photograph with our real names written on the back, and I open the Tipline website I submitted to before. My hands are shaking as I attach the time-stamped photos and type out a message saying we're at immediate risk and giving our exact address. I explain that our parents know something is wrong and they're talking about moving us again, and that we need help right now before it's too late. I hit send and watch the little progress bar move across the screen, and when it finally says the message went through, I feel this huge wave of relief mixed with terror. I delete all the evidence from the phone's browser history and photo gallery, then shove it back in my pocket. I flush the toilet and wash my hands, trying to look normal when I open the door. Mom is back in her chair in the hallway and she watches me walk from the bathroom to my bedroom. I can feel her stare on my back the whole way. I hide the phone in the floorboard again and lie down on my bed, trying to slow my breathing and act like everything is fine. The rest of the afternoon drags by with Mom and Dad switching off hallway duty every few hours. We eat dinner at the kitchen table in complete silence except for the sound of forks on plates. Nobody makes eye contact and the air feels heavy with everything we're not saying. Late that night, after Mom and Dad have finally gone to bed, I hear soft footsteps in the hallway. My sister appears in my doorway and gestures for me to come, and I slip out of bed as quietly as possible. We meet my younger brother and other sibling in the hallway, and tiptoe to the bathroom where we can whisper without being heard through bedroom walls. I keep my ear against the door listening for any sound of Mom or Dad waking up. My sister starts the conversation by saying we need to go over exactly what we're going to say one more time, and we all agree in hushed voices. We practice describing the filing cabinet in the shed and what we found inside, making sure we all tell the same story about the folders organized by year and the newspaper clippings about missing children. My younger brother rehearses explaining about the birth certificates with different names and the photograph with our real names written on the back. I remind everyone to mention that we've tested outside air multiple times with no reaction, proving the immune disorder story is fake. My other sibling practices talking about the fake medical condition name that doesn't exist anywhere online and how we have no actual medical equipment in the house. We take turns going through the key points until we all have them memorized, and my sister reminds us again to specifically mention the shed and the filing cabinet, so the police will know where to look for evidence. We rehearse staying calm and speaking clearly, knowing that if we get too emotional, people might not believe us. My younger brother asks what happens if they separate us and we can't talk to each other, and I say that's exactly why we need to have the story straight now before anything happens. We practice for maybe 20 minutes until we all feel confident about what we're going to say. My sister makes us promise not to defend Mom and Dad or make excuses for them, because the truth is they kidnapped us and lied to us our whole lives. We all agree, and I can see my younger brother is crying a little, but he wipes his eyes and nods. Before we leave the bathroom, I remind everyone that tomorrow might be the day everything changes, and we need to be ready. We go back to our rooms one at a time, and I lie in bed staring at my doorless doorway, unable to sleep. The next morning, I'm awake before dawn and positioned by my window watching the street. The sun comes up slowly, and I see neighbors leaving for work, kids waiting for the school bus, normal morning things that feel impossible from inside our house. Around 8:30, I see movement at the end of our street and my whole body goes tense. 2 police cars turn onto our block, followed by an unmarked dark sedan, and they're driving slowly like they're looking for addresses. Heidi comes out of her house and stands on her porch, and when the cars get closer, she points directly at our front door. The vehicles pull up and park in front of our house, and I watch as 4 people get out, including 2 uniformed officers, a woman in business clothes, and Heidi. My heart is beating so hard I can feel it in my throat and my hands start shaking. I hear the doorbell ring downstairs, and I move to the top of the stairs where I can hear what's happening. Dad's footsteps cross the living room, and I hear the front door open. I position myself where I can see part of the entryway if I lean over the railing, and I watch everything unfold below me. The adrenaline makes everything feel sharp and clear and terrifying all at once. I can hear my siblings moving in their rooms behind me, and I know they heard the doorbell too. This is it, the moment we've been preparing for, and there's no going back now. I hear Dad start talking in this fake, friendly voice, explaining that we have a serious medical condition and visitors are dangerous to our health. His words come out fast and nervous, and he's using phrases like immune-compromised and contamination risk. A woman's voice cuts through his explanation, firm and professional, saying they're here for a welfare check and they need to see all 4 children immediately. Dad's voice gets louder and more desperate, and he says something about not understanding the severity of our condition and how exposure could kill us. The woman says again that they need to see us and that he needs to cooperate, and I hear one of the police officers say something about obstruction. Dad tries to physically block the doorway, and his voice takes on this edge that I recognize from when he gets really angry. The woman identifies herself as a social worker and says if he doesn't let them in, they'll get a warrant and come back with more officers. I can hear Mom coming from the kitchen asking what's going on, and her voice sounds high and panicked. My sister appears next to me at the top of the stairs and grabs my hand, and my younger brother and other sibling are right behind her. We look at each other and I know this is the moment we have to act. If we don't do something right now, Dad might convince them to leave and we'll lose our chance. I make a split-second decision and run down the stairs, my bare feet slapping on the wood. My siblings follow right behind me, and I push past Dad to get to the door where the officers and the woman are standing. Dad tries to grab my arm, but I pull away, and one of the police officers steps between us immediately. I look at the woman and the officers, and the words come tumbling out fast and desperate. I tell them we need help, and that everything our parents said about being sick is a lie, that we're not actually ill, and they've been keeping us locked inside our whole lives. Dad is yelling now and trying to reach me, but the other officer moves to block him, and Mom is crying and saying, I don't know what I'm talking about. My sister steps forward and says it's true, that we found evidence in the shed proving we were kidnapped, and my younger brother is crying, but he nods and says we're the missing children from 12 years ago. The woman, who I'll later learn is named Maggie Bishop, holds up her hand for everyone to stop talking, and she looks directly at me with this serious but kind expression. She says she needs to speak with each of us separately, and that our parents need to cooperate right now. The police officers make it very clear that Dad and Mom have to step back and let this happen, and I can see the moment when Dad realizes he's lost control of the situation. His face goes from angry to scared, and Mom is still crying and reaching for us, but the officers keep them separated from us. Maggie Bishop insists we all go outside so she can talk to us away from our parents, and the officers escort us through the front door and onto the lawn. I step outside into real outside air surrounded by strangers for the first time I can actually remember, and the sunlight is so bright after being inside that I have to squint. It feels overwhelming and wonderful at the same time, and I can hear birds and cars, and the world is so much bigger and louder than it ever seemed through windows. My siblings cluster around me, and we're all blinking in the brightness, and neighbors are starting to come out of their houses to watch what's happening. Heidi is standing near the police cars, and when I look at her, she gives me this small, encouraging nod, and I feel grateful that she believed me enough to help. Maggie starts asking us questions in a calm, gentle voice, while the officers keep our parents inside the house, and I can see Mom and Dad through the front window watching us with these desperate expressions on their faces. The grass is cool and slightly wet under my bare feet, and the air smells like flowers and car exhaust and freedom, and even though I'm scared about what happens next, I know we did the right thing by speaking up. My younger brother is still crying, and my sister puts her arm around him, and we stand together in the front yard telling our story to people who can actually help us escape. Maggie pulls out a tablet and starts asking me questions in a calm voice. Basic things like my name and age and how long we've lived in the house. I answer as clearly as I can, even though my voice shakes, and she writes down everything I say without interrupting. She asks about the evidence in the shed, and I tell her about the filing cabinet and the newspaper clippings and the forged documents. My sister steps forward and confirms what I'm saying, her voice stronger than mine, and she explains how we all tested breathing outside air with no reaction. My younger brother nods when Maggie asks if this is true, and my other sibling quietly says yes when she turns to them. Through the front window, I can see Mom crying with her hands over her face while one officer stands near her, and Dad is arguing with the other officer, but I can't hear what he's saying. Maggie asks if our parents ever hit us or hurt us physically, and I tell her about Mom grabbing my arms hard enough to leave bruises when I was 7. My siblings share other moments of being locked in rooms or having things taken away, and Maggie keeps writing everything down with this serious expression. She asks if we want to talk to our parents, and all 4 of us say no at the same time. One of the officers walks over to his patrol car and picks up his radio, speaking into it with urgent hand gestures. Within minutes, I hear sirens in the distance getting louder, and 3 more police cars pull up to our house with lights flashing. Neighbors start coming out onto their porches and lawns, pointing and talking to each other, and I realize our whole street is watching this happen. More officers get out of the cars and start talking to the first 2, and someone brings out yellow tape that they start stringing across our driveway. The officer who was with Dad walks him toward one of the patrol cars with a hand on his arm, and I see metal handcuffs on Dad's wrists catching the sunlight. Mom sees this and makes this horrible wailing sound. Then her knees give out and she collapses onto the grass. An officer catches her before she hits the ground completely and helps her sit down, and a female officer kneels next to her. I feel dizzy watching all of this, like I'm floating above my body looking down at the scene. My sister grabs my hand and squeezes it hard, and I squeeze back because I need something solid to hold on to. Maggie talks quietly into her own phone, then tells us that medical staff are coming to check us over and make sure we're okay. She says we're safe now and that nobody is going to make us go back inside that house. An ambulance arrives about 10 minutes later, parking behind the police cars, and 2 EMTs get out carrying bags of equipment. They introduce themselves, but I don't catch their names because everything feels too loud and bright and fast. The EMTs are gentle and keep telling us we're safe and they just want to make sure we're healthy. They check our vital signs right there on the lawn, taking our blood pressure and listening to our hearts and looking in our ears. One of them asks if we've had any trouble breathing or any skin reactions, and we all say no. They wrap blankets around our shoulders even though it's warm outside, and I realize I'm shaking. The EMTs talk to Maggie and the officers, and then they tell us we need to go to the hospital for a full checkup. I watch as 2 officers walk Dad to a patrol car and help him into the back seat, and another officer does the same with Mom, who is still crying. My younger brother starts crying too when he sees them being taken away, and my sister puts her arm around him. We climb into the back of the ambulance and sit on the bench seats, and the EMTs close the doors behind us. Through the small windows, I can see Heidi standing on her lawn watching, and she gives me a small wave that makes my throat tight. The ambulance starts moving and I grip the edge of the seat, feeling every bump in the road. At the hospital, nurses meet us at the emergency entrance and walk us through automatic doors into a bright hallway that smells like cleaning products. They take us to a private room with 4 beds separated by curtains, and a doctor comes in wearing blue scrubs. He introduces himself as Dr. Dexter Raymond and shakes each of our hands, which surprises me because adults usually don't do that with kids. Dexter explains that he needs to run some tests to check our overall health and make sure we don't have any medical issues. He takes blood samples from each of us, talking through each step so we know what's coming. He listens to our hearts and lungs, checks our reflexes, looks at our skin and eyes and throat. He asks questions about our diet and sleep and if we've ever been seriously sick, and we answer as honestly as we can. A nurse comes in and out bringing supplies and writing things on a chart. The whole process takes a long time, and by the time Dexter finishes with the initial exam, my arm is sore from the blood draw, and I'm exhausted. He tells us he'll have preliminary results in a few hours and that we should try to rest. Nurses bring us sandwiches and juice boxes, and we eat sitting on the hospital beds with our legs dangling over the edges. That afternoon, a man in a suit knocks on our door and introduces himself as Detective Vikram Mahmood. He has kind eyes and a calm voice, and he pulls up a chair to sit at our level instead of standing over us. Detective Mahmood explains that he needs to ask us some questions about our lives and what we found in the shed. He starts with me since I was the one who discovered the evidence, asking detailed questions about the filing cabinet and what documents I saw. I tell him about the newspaper clippings and the forged birth certificates and the old photographs. He asks if I took pictures and I show him my phone, scrolling through all the photos I took that night in the shed. He asks permission to send the photos to his email and I agree. Detective Mahmood asks about our daily routines, what our parents told us about being sick, how they controlled our movements. My siblings take turns answering his questions, each adding details the others forgot. He asks what we remember from before, and I tell him about my memory of sunscreen and grass. He writes everything down in a notebook, his pen moving quickly across the pages. When he's done with the initial questions, I ask him what happens next. Detective Mahmood explains that they're getting a search warrant for our house and the shed, and that they'll be collecting all the evidence I told him about. He says we did the right thing by speaking up and that we're very brave. His words make me feel less guilty about destroying the only family I've known, even though part of me still feels like a traitor. I give Detective Mahmood exact details about where the filing cabinet is and which drawer had the birth certificates. He asks if there's anything else in the house that might be important, and I tell him about the old laptop I hid in the neighbor's recycling bin. He makes a note to retrieve it. Dexter comes back into the room with papers in his hand and a small smile on his face. He tells us that all our test results came back normal, that we have perfectly healthy immune systems with no signs of any disorder. He says our blood work shows we're well nourished, and our physical development is appropriate for our ages. There's nothing wrong with us medically. No reason we ever needed to be isolated. Hearing it confirmed by a real doctor makes something break loose in my chest, and I start crying even though I'm trying not to. My siblings are crying too, and Dexter hands us tissues and says it's okay to feel relieved. That evening, Maggie comes back and says she needs to talk to us about where we're staying tonight. She takes us to a conference room down the hall with a big window, and we sit in chairs that spin. Through the window, we can see our house in the distance, and there are police cars parked all around it with their lights still flashing. Officers in uniforms are going in and out of the front door and the shed, carrying boxes and bags. Someone is taking photographs of everything, the bright flash visible even from here. We watch as they bring out the filing cabinet on a dolly, and then more boxes stacked on top of each other. An officer carries out our fake medical equipment that was just for show, and another one brings out bags of documents. Watching strangers take apart the place where we lived our whole lives feels wrong, even though I know it needs to happen. The house looks smaller from here, less scary. Just a regular building that held too many lies. A technician in a white coat comes into the conference room with a case of supplies. She explains that she needs to collect DNA samples from each of us using cotton swabs on the inside of our cheeks. She says the samples will be compared to evidence from the missing children case, and also run through databases to find potential biological relatives. The swabbing only takes a few seconds per person and doesn't hurt at all, but knowing what it means makes my hands shake. We might finally learn who we really are and where we came from, what our real names are, who our actual parents were. The technician labels each tube carefully with our current names and case numbers, then packs everything back into her case. She tells us the results could take a few days or a few weeks depending on what they find. After she leaves, Maggie sits down with us and explains what happens next. She says we're being placed in emergency protective custody while the investigation continues, which means we can't go back to our house or have contact with our parents. She promises that we'll stay together as siblings and that she'll be our primary caseworker, checking on us regularly. My younger brother starts crying again and asks where we're going to sleep tonight. Maggie says she's found a foster home that has room for all four of us, a woman who's experienced with emergency placements. She assures us that Mrs. Smithon is kind and that her house is safe and comfortable. The idea of sleeping somewhere completely new tonight, in a stranger's house, makes everything feel too real and too fast. We gather the few things the hospital gave us, mostly the clothes we were wearing and the blankets from the ambulance, and follow Maggie out to her car. The drive across town takes about 20 minutes, and I watch the neighborhoods change through the window. We pull up to a small house with a neat lawn and flowers in the front garden, and a woman comes out onto the porch. Mrs. Smithon is older, with gray hair and a soft face, and she waves at us as we get out of the car. She welcomes us inside and shows us the bedrooms where we'll be staying, 2 rooms with 2 beds each. The house smells like cooking and laundry detergent, normal house smells that are different from our house. Everything feels wrong and unfamiliar, even though it's objectively nicer than what we're used to. Mrs. Smithon makes us hot chocolate and sets out cookies on the kitchen table, trying to make us comfortable. We sit in her living room on a couch that's softer than ours was, and we huddle together because we don't know what else to do. My younger brother won't let go of my sister's hand, and my other sibling sits pressed against my side. We're free now. We're safe. We're out of that house. But it doesn't feel like victory. It feels like we're floating in space with nothing to hold on to. Everything we knew torn away, even if it was all built on lies. Mrs. Smithon sits in a chair across from us and talks quietly about house rules and routines, but I can barely hear her over the rushing sound in my ears. Mrs. Smithon eventually stops talking and shows us to our bedrooms, 2 rooms with 2 beds each, like she said before. My sister and younger brother take 1 room, and my other sibling stays with me in the second one. We don't unpack the few things we have because we don't really have anything to unpack. Dinner is quiet and awful, even though the food is good. Mrs. Smithon made spaghetti and garlic bread, and there's salad, and everything looks normal, but none of us can eat much. My younger brother pushes his food around his plate and won't look at anyone. My sister keeps crying silently with tears just running down her face while she stares at the table. My other sibling manages a few bites but then gives up and asks to be excused. I force myself to eat because I know we need to keep our strength up, but everything tastes like nothing. After dinner, Mrs. Smithon suggests we might want to rest, and we all go to our rooms without argument. My other sibling and I lie in our separate beds in the dark, and neither of us can sleep. Around midnight, my sibling whispers across the room asking if I think Mom and Dad are scared right now in jail. I don't know how to answer that, so I just say I don't know. My sibling is quiet for a while and then says they feel guilty for not fighting harder to stay with them, even though they know intellectually that what happened to us was wrong. I understand that feeling completely, because part of me still wants to defend them too, even after everything. In the other room, I can hear my younger brother crying and my sister trying to comfort him. The next morning, Mrs. Smithon makes pancakes and we sit around her kitchen table trying to act normal. Through the window, I see a white van pull up outside with a satellite dish on top, and my stomach drops. Another van parks behind it, and then a third one. Mrs. Smithon notices me staring and goes to look, and her face gets tight. She calls Maggie right away, and within 20 minutes, Maggie arrives looking stressed and tired. She explains that somehow the media found out where we're staying, and they've connected our case to the old missing children investigation from 12 years ago. She says it's becoming a really big story and that she's arranging for privacy protections and possibly moving us to a different location. The idea of moving again when we just got here makes my younger brother start crying again. Maggie makes some calls and gets the police to come move the news vans back from the house, but we can still see them parked down the street. She tells us not to go outside or near windows and that she's working on better security. The whole thing makes me feel exposed and violated in a new way, because now strangers everywhere are talking about what happened to us, and we have no control over the story. I go upstairs to the bedroom and pull out the old phone I still have hidden in my pocket. I log into the support group and see a message from James sent early this morning. He says he saw news coverage about 4 kids found after being held captive for years, and he recognized some details and wanted to check if it was us. His message is careful and doesn't ask invasive questions, but just says he's thinking of us, and that he's proud of me for being brave enough to find the truth. He says he's available anytime I need to talk, and that he knows how hard this must be. Reading his words makes me cry for the first time since everything happened, because his friendship feels like the only normal, stable thing in my entire life right now. I write back thanking him and saying yes, it's us, and that everything is crazy and overwhelming. He responds right away saying he's here whenever I need him, and that I should focus on taking care of myself and my siblings. 2 days later, Detective Mahmoud comes to visit us at the foster home. Maggie is there too, and we all sit in Mrs. Smithon's living room while he opens a folder with official-looking papers. He explains that the preliminary DNA results came back from the lab, and they've confirmed that the people we called Mom and Dad are not our biological parents. The evidence from the shed has been matched to evidence from the missing children case, and everything lines up perfectly. He says our real families have been notified that we've been found alive after 12 years. Hearing it confirmed officially makes it feel horribly final, even though I already knew the truth. My sister starts crying again, and my younger brother just sits there looking blank and empty. Detective Mahmoud is gentle but direct, and he explains that there will be more tests and more evidence processing, but that the case is solid. He says criminal charges are being filed and that there will be court proceedings we'll need to participate in. The whole time he's talking, I feel like I'm underwater again, and can't quite hear everything he's saying. 3 days after that, we have to attend a preliminary protective hearing at the courthouse. Maggie drives us there early in the morning, and we go in through a back entrance to avoid reporters. The courtroom is smaller than I expected from TV shows, and there's a judge behind a big desk and lawyers sitting at tables. We sit in a row behind one of the tables with Maggie next to us. The judge explains that our captors will appear via video link from the jail where they're being held. When the screen lights up, I see Mom and Dad sitting at a table wearing orange jumpsuits, and my whole body goes cold. Mom looks smaller somehow, and her face is puffy from crying. Dad looks angry and won't make eye contact with the camera. The judge asks questions, and lawyers talk about custody and evidence and protection orders. My sister cries silently through the whole thing, and my younger brother holds her hand so tight his knuckles turn white. The judge orders that we stay in protective custody, and that Mom and Dad are not allowed any contact with us at all. Their lawyers try to argue that they're loving parents who made mistakes, but the prosecutor talks about the evidence of kidnapping and false imprisonment and premeditation. When the hearing ends, the screen goes dark and they're gone, and I realize I don't know if I'll ever see them in person again. After the hearing, Maggie takes us to her office and gives us copies of the original missing persons reports from 12 years ago. She spreads the papers out on her desk, and we read about ourselves as 4-year-olds who vanished from a playground. I learn that my real birth name is different from the one I've used my whole life. I read about my biological parents who filed the report and never stopped searching. There are details about the life I was supposed to have, including the preschool I attended and the neighborhood where we lived. My siblings read their own reports, and we're all quiet, processing this information about who we really are. The grief of all that lost time feels crushing and huge. I think about the 12 years my real parents spent looking for me and the childhood I should have had. Maggie explains that she's setting up counseling for all of us with someone who specializes in trauma and kidnapping cases. The next week, we start sessions with Nadine Bauer, who has an office across town with comfortable chairs and soft lighting. She's probably in her 40s with kind eyes and a calm voice. In our first session, she explains that everything we're feeling is normal and valid, including the confusing feelings about our captors. She asks us to talk about what the last few weeks have been like, and I try to explain, but I can barely get words out without crying. My siblings are the same way, and we all break down trying to describe the layers of betrayal and loss. Nadine doesn't rush us or try to make us feel better with empty words. She just listens and validates and helps us name the different emotions we're experiencing. She says healing isn't going to be quick or linear, and that we'll all process this differently. By the end of the session, I feel exhausted, but slightly less alone. A few days later, Detective Mahmoud comes back with more news. He says they've located biological relatives who want to meet us. For me, it's an aunt and uncle named Brian and Rosanna Cartwright, who are my mom's sister and brother-in-law. He explains they've been part of the search efforts for all 12 years and never gave up hope. He shows us photos of them and asks if we'd be open to meeting them. The idea fills me with equal parts hope and complete terror. That night, my siblings and I have a long discussion about whether we're ready to meet our biological families yet. My sister argues strongly that we should wait because it's too much too fast, and we're barely holding it together as it is. I say that I think we should at least meet them once to see how we feel because they've been looking for us all this time. My younger brother doesn't know what he wants, and my other sibling says they're scared but willing to try. We go back and forth for over an hour discussing the pros and cons. Finally, we agree to do a supervised meeting with Nadine there for support, and with the understanding that we can stop anytime if it gets too overwhelming. Maggie arranges everything and also sets up a visit back to our old house so we can get personal belongings under supervision. The day we go back feels surreal and wrong. Police officers escort us inside, and we're only allowed in certain rooms. Walking through those familiar spaces feels like entering a museum of our whole lives in captivity. Everything looks the same but different now that I know the truth behind it all. I go to my bedroom and gather my favorite books and the few things that actually feel like mine. My siblings do the same in their rooms, moving quietly like ghosts. I try not to look at the family photos on the walls showing the 4 of us with Mom and Dad at various ages, all documenting our fake family. In the living room, there's a photo of all 6 of us from last Christmas, and I have to turn away from it because the smiles look so real and normal. We load our things into bags and leave as quickly as possible because being there makes me feel sick and sad and angry all at once. Over the next few days, Heidi came to the police station to give her official statement about everything she'd noticed over the years. She told Detective Mahmoud about how she'd never seen us kids outside even once in the 12 years we lived across the street. She described the weird air filtration system she could see through the windows and how Mom would practically panic if anyone got too close to the front door. She mentioned the time a delivery guy tried to hand a package directly to Dad, and Mom came running out screaming about contamination. Heidi said she'd always felt something was off, but didn't know what to do about it until I slipped that note through her mail slot. Detective Mahmood told us later that her testimony helped establish the pattern of control and isolation, which made the case stronger. I wanted to thank her, but Maggie said it wasn't appropriate yet since Heidi might have to testify in court. Still, I felt grateful that she'd trusted her gut and helped us when it mattered most. Mrs. Smithon sat down with us one evening and pulled out a stack of papers about school enrollment. She explained that fall semester started in 3 weeks, and we needed to get registered if we wanted to attend. The idea of sitting in a classroom with other teenagers made my stomach flip between excited and terrified. She helped each of us fill out the forms, and I marked down that I'd be starting 11th grade. Mom's homeschooling had kept me caught up academically according to the placement tests, but I knew I was years behind socially. I'd never had a friend my own age in person, never navigated a cafeteria or a locker or any of the normal teenage stuff. Mrs. Smithon must have seen the panic on my face because she squeezed my shoulder and said lots of kids feel nervous starting at a new school. I didn't correct her that this was different, that I'd never been to any school ever. Nadine scheduled an extra session to help me prepare a statement for the next court hearing. She explained that the judge wanted to hear directly from us about how the isolation affected us and what we needed going forward. We sat in her office with a notepad, and she asked me questions while I tried to put words to everything. Writing it out made me realize how much normal childhood stuff we'd missed. Birthday parties and sleepovers and learning to ride bikes and going to the movies and having friends and playing sports and all the tiny everyday things that make up growing up. I got angry writing it down. Really angry in a way I hadn't let myself feel before. But then I had to write about the confusing part too, about how I still had feelings for the people who took us. Nadine said that was normal and okay, that love and betrayal could exist at the same time. She helped me write it in a way that was honest about both the damage they caused and the complicated emotions I couldn't just turn off. The next protective hearing happened 2 weeks later, and we all had to go to the courthouse again. The judge read through our statements and asked us each directly if we wanted any supervised contact with our captors. My siblings and I had talked about it the night before, and we all agreed to say no. Their attorneys stood up and tried to paint them as loving parents who made mistakes out of fear and mental illness. They showed photos of us at various ages looking happy and healthy, argued that we'd been well cared for and educated. But the prosecutor presented all the evidence of premeditation, the forged documents and the planning and the stolen identities. The judge looked at everything and extended our custody arrangement with Mrs. Smithon. When he denied the request for supervised visits, I felt this weird mix of relief and guilt. Part of me wanted to see them, to understand why they did this. But the bigger part knew I wasn't ready, and might never be. Maggie met with us after the hearing to explain what happened next. The district attorney had filed formal kidnapping charges along with multiple counts of false imprisonment and child endangerment. She walked us through what each charge meant, and said the case would likely take months or even years to fully resolve through the courts. There would be more hearings and probably a trial eventually. The legal process moved slowly, but at least it was moving forward toward some kind of justice. She also told us that our biological families were still waiting to meet us whenever we felt ready. I asked if we could wait a little longer, and she said that was completely fine, that we got to control the timeline for that. 6 weeks passed, and our placement with Mrs. Smithon shifted from temporary to longer term. She officially agreed to keep all 4 of us as long as we needed, which took away some of the uncertainty. We settled into routines that felt almost normal. Regular bedtimes where we actually chose when to sleep. Family dinners where we helped cook and set the table. Household chores like taking out trash and doing dishes. Small everyday things that other kids probably took for granted but felt kind of miraculous to us. I could choose my own clothes each morning from the donations people had sent. I could go outside whenever I wanted, walk around the block or sit in the backyard. I could open windows and breathe real air and feel sun on my face. My younger brother started smiling more, and my sister stopped defending our captors as much. We were healing slowly, in tiny increments. My first day at the public high school arrived, and I barely slept the night before. Mrs. Smithon drove me there early and walked me to the main office where a guidance counselor was waiting. She gave me a map of the building and my class schedule and walked me to my first period classroom. I managed to find my locker and figure out the combination. I sat through English and history and math without having a panic attack, though my hands shook the whole time. At lunch, I stood in the cafeteria holding my tray and had no idea where to sit or what the rules were. I picked an empty spot at the end of a table and ate quickly with my head down. A girl with red hair asked if I was new, and I managed to say yes and tell her my name. She said welcome and asked where I transferred from. I said it was complicated and she didn't push. The conversation lasted maybe 2 minutes, but it felt like a huge accomplishment. By the end of the day, I was completely exhausted, but also kind of amazed that I'd actually done it. That evening, I video chatted with James and told him about navigating the cafeteria and trying to figure out where to sit. He laughed and said his first day at his school was a disaster too. He'd sat at the wrong table and some seniors told him to move. He shared more awkward school stories about getting lost and walking into the wrong classroom and forgetting his gym clothes. For a few minutes, I felt like a regular teenager talking to a friend about normal teenage problems. James had this way of making everything seem less scary by reminding me that everyone struggles with this stuff. His perspective helped me see how far I'd actually come in just a few months, from being locked inside to sitting in a real classroom with other kids. Nadine arranged for us to visit a public park under her supervision the following weekend. She drove us there and said we could explore for an hour while she stayed on a bench nearby. The sensory experience hit me immediately. The smell of cut grass and flowers, the sound of other children laughing and playing on the playground equipment, the feeling of wind moving through my hair and sun warming my skin. All of it triggered that early memory from before we were taken, the one with sunscreen and grass that I'd thought might be a dream. I walked toward the playground and watched kids climbing on the structures, heard their voices calling to each other. My younger brother ran to the swings and started pumping his legs. I stood there and started crying. Not from sadness exactly, but from this overwhelming release of something I'd been holding in. Nadine came over and asked if I was okay. I nodded and said I remembered this. Remembered being little and free and happy before everything got stolen. She said that memory was real and precious, and I could hold on to it now. In my next private counseling session, Nadine suggested I write a letter to the woman I called Mom. She said I didn't have to send it, that it was just for me to process my feelings. I sat there with a blank piece of paper for a long time before I started writing. I wrote that part of me still loved her despite the terrible things she did. I wrote that I was angry about having that love, that it felt like another way she'd messed me up. I told her about the confusion of missing her sometimes, even though I knew what she'd done was wrong. I wrote about the good memories mixed in with the bad ones, how she'd read to us at bedtime and made our favorite foods and celebrated our fake birthdays. I filled 3 pages before I stopped, my hand cramping. Nadine read it and said my feelings didn't have to make sense right now. She explained that healing wasn't a straight line, that I could be angry and sad and grateful and hurt all at the same time. She said the complexity of my emotions was actually a sign of growth, that I was learning to hold multiple truths at once. A few days later, Mrs. Smithon asked what we wanted for dinner, and the question stopped me cold because nobody had ever asked that before. My younger brother suggested tacos, and she smiled and said we could make them together. We stood in her kitchen choosing toppings from the store, and I picked things I'd only seen in pictures like sour cream and salsa, and about 6 different kinds of cheese. Mrs. Smithon showed us how to cook the meat and warm the shells, and we set everything out on the counter in bowls. My sister grabbed a shell and started piling things on until it was so full the whole thing split apart and fell on her plate in a messy heap. My younger brother laughed, and it was the first real smile I'd seen on his face in weeks. We all made our tacos too full and watched them fall apart, and somehow that made it better, made it feel normal and silly and good. My sister looked at me while we were eating and said it felt good, even though she was still mixed up about everything. Mrs. Smithon didn't push or ask questions, just let us have this one normal moment of choosing our own food and making a mess together. 3 months after the welfare check, I stood in the backyard at night looking up at the stars. Court cases were still waiting to happen, and biological families wanted to meet us, and I had years of catching up to do on normal life. But I was breathing real air without any filters or lies. I was making my own choices about small things like what to eat and when to go outside. I was slowly learning who I actually was under all the fake stories and locked doors. The fear was still there sitting in my chest. So was something else that felt like cautious hope that maybe we would actually be okay.